lose. Now, that's what I would call bargaining. An example of negotiation would be a more relationship-driven transaction, such as two companies partnering to sell products. Maybe company A is going to distribute company B's products, and the best deal there would be one that's long-term and that's solidly profitable for both organizations. So therefore, it's most likely a little less about the price and more about a combination of elements like advertising support, for example, that overall would balance out as a win-win for both parties. So in essence, the greater the level of interdependence, the more likely it's a negotiation as opposed to a one-time transaction such as a car purchase. Situations where there's usually one winner, like the car situation, we'll call those zero-sum, while non-zero-sum is attributed to those win-win scenarios. How you communicate during negotiations can substantially affect the outcome. The optimal negotiation environment is the most intimate, which is usually in person. Now, phone negotiations would come in second because you do have the other people on, or person or people on a live conversation, but yet there's still room for distraction that you don't have any control over. Finally, the worst way to negotiate is via email or text, because both of these are one-way mediums that limit your ability to receive timely feedback. Plus, with a text, you don't even have a lot of space. But even worse, when you send an email or even a text, many times what you think you wrote and meant is not necessarily what the recipient read. Email leaves a lot of room for misunderstanding, questions, doubt, and really other interpretations that you can't control. Even worse, emails can also be forwarded to one or many and can be used as leverage to improve a deal with your competition or to involve more players to make the negotiation even more difficult. So in an optimal negotiation, you want to have the least amount of variables that you can control and the most real-time feedback, which is why I like in-person meetings the best. These 5 steps create a strong foundation for effective negotiations. Most of your work, a lot of people don't realize this, but most of your work is done before the negotiation even begins. You got to determine your objective, the type of negotiation. You want to identify your alternatives, which we call BATNAs, and you want to do research about the other party in the market. All this needs to happen prior to any conversations with any other party. You know, anyone can follow a map. Take Route 95 for 5 miles to exit 12, then turn left on Jones Street, go 2 miles, whatever. But what good is a map if you don't even know why or where you're going? Once you know your plan is to buy a house in a great school district with low taxes for under $500,000, well, now you can create a strategy and a plan. My strategy could be to examine all the data for home prices, taxes, and school districts in the metropolitan area to find the county with the highest number of homes that meet my criteria. Now the directions make sense if they're part of the execution of your strategy and plan. Therefore, the most successful negotiators start with an objective from which a strategy is created, with the tactics being the specific steps necessary to achieve your objective. And later today, I'm also going to talk about how to create a great strategy, which is one of the most critical steps necessary to set the stage for winning negotiations. So what is fair in negotiations? I've heard people say they can't do that. That's not fair. Well, Roger Fisher and William Ury in their book, Getting to Yes, they emphasize the importance of separating the people from the problem. In a nutshell, they state the importance of keeping emotions out of negotiations. Imagine a scenario where someone needs to get across a river to go see her boyfriend in 24 hours. So the ship captain offers to take her if she's willing to pay twice the normal price. She pays the fee, and he takes her across. Now, some would say the captain was unethical and unfair because he took advantage of this woman at a time of need. But was he fair? You know, some would say no, and some would say he was honorable. I say he's honorable because he did exactly what he said he would. Fair is irrelevant. It's his boat, and she can do whatever she wants. No one forced her to pay the fee. But what about when people withhold information, such as when there's been no sales of the product to date, and they tell you that since they've introduced the product, there's been a lot of calls and inquiries, and they're concerned they might run out of inventory in the next 2 weeks. Now, is that fair? They didn't lie, but they did make it sound like the product has been selling well. I consider both of these actions fair because nobody lied. And in the case of the captain, he did exactly what he said he would do for the price. In today's class, we're going to talk about 5 ways to utilize negotiations best practices to help maximize your productivity for your project teams too. And that's what's important. Everything we're going to talk about in this class doesn't just apply to negotiating with other parties. It also applies to negotiating with anyone. And for those that manage project teams, we're going to talk about very specific techniques and things you can do to make it easier for you to get more cooperation and become more effective with these people. And we're going to get into all those details later in today's class. So can an individual out-negotiate a billion-dollar company? Can you negotiate with one of the largest companies in the world and get them to increase their price by 50%? I did, and I'm going to tell you more about how using negotiations best practices, I made it happen, and we're going to talk about that in our class soon. How do you get a group of 5 friends to eat at the restaurant you want? It's what and how you say it. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's talk about that. What's the difference between what do you think of going to Ruth Chris's Steakhouse versus can we go to Ruth Chris's Steakhouse versus I made a reservation at Ruth Chris's Steakhouse for this Friday at 7. I checked 3 restaurants and most don't have availability till 9 for a group of 5. And Ruth Chris's just got rated 5 stars by Zaggett's and has a 2-for-1 entree deal this Friday. Confidence, preparation, homework, benefits. That is how you get it done. People who are unsure of themselves get overtaken by those who are confident and have done their homework. But now, could the tonality and confidence, could that change a negotiation regarding a foreclosure? Would it make the difference between staying and being evicted from your home? Let's find that out in our first exercise. So in the video we're about to see, we're going to see the impact of what you say and how you say it, as well as what preparation and advanced planning can do. So what you want to do now is these are the URLs to get to this video. Either one works. I'll just put one of them in here. You can see it's in blue. But there's the URL. So let's watch the video, and then we'll come back and put comments in the chat box. It'll take about 5 minutes to watch the video. So let's go watch the video now, and then we're back in 5 minutes. All right, we're back. So let's see some comments here. Put your comments in the chat box. What did you guys do? The research and be prepared. Yes, yes, and yes again. Win, win, win for both. Yes. Come up with a realistic plan which could lead to a win-win. Absolutely. Everything is negotiable, but don't let your emotions drive the negotiations. Try and play with the opposite party's thinking process. Excellent. Great idea to bring the other party to the problem-solving scenario. Yes, we just watched the video. It's in the exercise. So if you want to watch the video, if you scroll back in the chat, you can see the link to it. So you can check that out. But no, all these things. Any other comments? I don't know what TLDR means. But the video, if you scroll back in the chat box, you can find the link to the video. So, I mean, I think that control, please put your comments in the chat box. I see some people putting it in the Q&A. Put them in the chat box, please. So it'll work so that I only have questions in the chat box. By the way, if you have questions, individual questions, this is the time to put them in the Q&A box. Because after we discuss this, if there's any questions, I'm going to answer specific questions, not general comments and things on the video. We're talking about that now, but I'm going to answer specific questions in a few minutes. So if you do have questions, I would put those in the chat box, in the Q&A box. Sorry, now I'm getting confused. In the Q&A box now. So put your questions in the Q&A box. I want to answer as many questions as I can, because I want everybody to benefit from this class. So for the video, we really saw some, I think, very important things. And the big one is do your homework. What happened with the woman? Why do you think she was so upset? Tell me what happened with the woman. Put some thoughts in the chat box here. What happened with the woman? What was going on there? With her? What's the biggest difference between the woman and the man, the first and the second person? Tell me the biggest difference between the first and the second person in this whole thing. Someone put some comments in the chat box. She got emotional. Why do you think emotions overtook her? Why do you think emotions? Yeah, she had an emotional response. Absolutely. Why do you think she was emotional? What caused her? Is that just her personality? What do you think drove that? She took it personally. She was only offering a solution for herself. No options with the bank. The second person was more rational. Absolutely. What else do we see? What's the big difference? Why do you think the second person was more rational? What did they bring? She was losing her home, not prepared. That is huge. Not prepared. I've taught classes. The opposing party painted a bleak picture. She was focusing on what happens when the negotiation fails, not on the negotiation. Exactly. Expectations the listener will agree with her. She wasn't confident. She also expected him to solve her problem. She wanted to say, you can't do this to me. You have to make it easy for me. Well, why are we having this meeting if I'm supposed to? She got overwhelmed by the baton painted by the loan officer. The other person came in who knew his options and came with options to negotiate. Did research and brought ideas. The amazing thing, we have this thing called the internet. We can literally get answers to almost any question you can imagine. Obviously, you got to validate that it's credible information, but you at least get some direction. You at least get something to work with when you do some research online. There's 1,000 articles, I'm sure, with respect to foreclosure. There's probably zillions, if not thousands, of articles written about it. So you could literally go read the articles and find out what the banks do and how they work and why they work a certain way. There's so many ways to deal with this. It's mind-boggling. But also when you go to a negotiation, it's important to be prepared. You might not get what you want. So setting realistic expectations is important. Saying, if I lose my house, I don't know what to do. That's not an answer. What is your alternative? That's what we're going to talk about that later on, the importance of having alternatives. Before every negotiation, you want to identify your alternatives. Because if you don't, you're just hostage. I think what we had here was a hostage situation where somebody felt she was feeling hostage. She had no options. So if you go into negotiation saying, I must have this, I have no alternatives, think of the pressure that puts on you. It's really enormous. It's just enormous pressure. And the reality is we can't have everything. So you've really got to be prepared if it doesn't go your way. And you might not like that answer. You know, someone losing their house, that's very scary. If they don't have money for a deposit, they better start working on finding money. They better find a solution, you know, and if nothing else, think about obviously the bank doesn't want to, also seeing it in the other person's eyes is very valuable. Because at the end of the day, the bank doesn't want to own and sell your house. They'd rather you just pay the bill. So you've got to come up with strategy, you know, you've got to learn what they will accept and won't accept before you go to the meeting so you can be prepared for that. So that's part of the whole thing. That's really important to do that. That is really important to do that. Otherwise, you're just going to be a hostage. And if you're a hostage, you're going to get emotional and it's not going to go well. So don't see any questions in here. So we're going to move on. If somebody has any questions in the Q&A, now's the time to ask them. Again, I want to help everybody win. So you've got to ask the question so I can answer them. You've got me for another 2.5 hours. Please take advantage of the fact that you're part of this course and you have an opportunity to learn some more. So let's move on. And we'll come back. We'll have another Q&A session in a little while. But definitely put your questions in the Q&A box and make sure that you get them in there so the next time we do this, I can answer your question. So 5 steps to mastering your negotiations. The first one, yes, fear of losing her house was making her uncomfortable because she wasn't prepared. Because you need to assume you are losing your house. And what are you going to do about it? And if you can take a step up, what are the options for the bank? And she could have researched that and found that out. Let me answer one question. Someone just put it in the Q&A box, and then we'll start this in a second. How would you deal with a negotiation counterpart who's hostile from the get-go? Great question. The first question is, why are they hostile from the get-go? Now, you're going to say, I don't know. But that's what you need to find out. Now, some people believe that aggressive, nasty behavior an intimidation type behavior is going to help you win. And, I don't think I've ever, maybe I must have had people who did that in my career. I've done hundreds, if not thousands of negotiations. And I just say to people, what is wrong? I try to be collaborative. I think if someone was getting hostile at the outset, I would say, help me out. I'm trying to understand what are you upset about? That would be the first step, because if someone's nasty or disrespectful, we're not going to go very far here because you're being nasty and disrespectful. And I'm trying to understand what the problem is. Now, in some cases, there are stories where companies have had clients and they've treated the client badly and now the client's angry. Well, I believe that there's a reason for that, okay? And you have to address that anger. You have to address what the issue is. So to me, if someone starts a negotiation and they're hostile, I want to understand what's going on. Because at the end of the day, something you got to remember, no one is sitting in front of you unless they have some desire to put a deal together. Otherwise, why are they there? Maybe they're just there to yell at you because they're mad about something. So then find out what they're mad about and solve it. Whatever the reason they're there, the only reason they're talking to you is because they have interest in doing a deal with you. We don't know what the terms are. We don't know under what basis, but they do have interest. They wouldn't be there. If they don't like you and they don't want to do business with you, why would they have a meeting with you? Unless maybe they're mad at you for something and they want to have a meeting with you to yell at you. But then I would want to know what are you upset about? So you really need to find out why they're upset. Should the listener also be, I don't know what this question is, says, should the listener also be reciprocated the negotiation, or is that to expectations? Can this person clarify this question? I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure. Should the listener also, I'm not sure what you mean. So maybe you could restate the question, and I'll be happy to come back to it later on to try to help out. But let's get into this. So the first step in mastering negotiations is to determine your objective. And, some people say, well, that's crazy, Roy. Of course I know why I'm here. Do you? You would be amazed at how many people never really think about their true objective in a negotiation. Oh, yeah, we'll do a deal. Why? Why do you want to do a deal with them? What do you want? The first question is, what do you want? And what do you want to ask for? So, if you want a raise and you say, I want a raise, I want a good raise. I don't know what a good raise is. Maybe to you, a good raise is 40%. To your manager, a good raise might be 4% or 2%. So we don't know what that is. So you need to be specific. I want to get a $5,000 salary increase. I want to buy the Toyota Prius for $23,000. I want to get the car for less. That is not enough because less could be 10 cents less. You got to be specific because without your objective, you are really like a rudderless ship, drifting whichever way the wind or wave goes. You need to be specific. So, you need to understand what you want and what you want to achieve. Is this what you want or what you think you can get? Now, that's another thing that's really important. Sometimes people say, well, I really want to get this at half price, but they'll never give it to me, so I'll be lucky to get $10 off. Well, you have a conflict there. Okay, why do you want 50% off? Do you understand why? Because negotiating for something you really don't want, you're not going to have your heart into it. You're not going to be thinking in that way. So you really want to think about what do you want? What do you really want? And why do you really want that? Do you want 50% off because you don't feel you can sell the products for enough money to make it worthwhile? Why do you want 50% off? So yes, you still have to be realistic. Maybe this isn't the right product for you. So this is the first step, is to determine your objective, to prepare and be ready for this. So the next thing is you want to create an effective strategy. A strategy is a plan of action designed to achieve a specific goal or solve a problem. Because strategy is all about gaining, or at least attempting to gain, a position of advantage over the other party that you're negotiating with, whether they're adversaries, competitors, potential partners. But the idea is with the strategy, you're building leverage, you're building strength. Now, in order to create an effective strategy, you first need to do advanced research on the other party, the market, your competitors, their objectives, their motives. What do they want? What would make them say, I must have your product now? What are their burning desires? You need to know as much as you can about the other party and the market environment. And once you have this information, you need to view it in the context of your company, your resources, your products, your services. How do you stack up to them and within the market? 90% of the work for a successful negotiation happens before the meeting. I'll say that again. 90% of the work for a successful negotiation happens before the meeting. That is really important. You would be amazed how many people don't prepare, how many people don't do the homework. And by the way, if you cut this corners on this thing, you're only cheating yourself. You're only cheating yourself. So do it right and you make it better. I have learned in my life that when you're in a rush to do something, that fast is slow. Meaning you race through something and then you find out you didn't do it right and you have to go do it again, or you just don't get what you want. I've learned this so many times that I've gotten to a point, I take my time, I get the thing done right, and it makes my life so much easier. So taking the time to do it right the first time, do the thorough homework, it will make a huge difference. I've researched stuff thinking, oh, I really want this. And then because I did enough research, I discover I had no idea it does this. I don't want that. I don't care about that. And I changed my mind. I don't care anymore. Do your homework. It's so important. Now, if your objective, for example, let me give you an example. If your objective is to market a new product, say an accounting software program for small business, you need to totally understand all the competitive issues. But most importantly, you need to understand your target companies, their culture, the software they're currently using, the management personalities, what their interests and needs are. Now, based on your research, now you can create a strategy to sell your software to a segment of the market, say real estate companies with between 100 and 300 employees who build and develop properties. Now, maybe you chose them because their current available software is lacking key capabilities as compared to the market. So your strategy now is to reach them by positioning yourself as the authority in the developer accounting software space. Because now you've identified a large target list of companies and contacts to solicit. But how do you get them interested in your software and willing to pay your high price? Or should you just discount the software and get them to try it for a year and raise the price? So effective negotiations has a lot to do with advanced planning and research. You know, at the end of the day, it'd be great if all your largest prospects called you in for a meeting and said, hey, we want to talk about your software. Or in the case of project managers, if the top developers at your company ask you, can I work on your projects, instead of the opposite? But unfortunately, most of this doesn't happen. So you've got to be prepared. Now, we're going to talk about 2 tools that could make this happen for you. But first, we need to understand the 2 types of negotiation and why using one of them could put you in a position of weakness quickly that is almost impossible to correct. I have heard people tell me that they just negotiated a lower price on a recent purchase. And they also talk about negotiating for better prices. You know, I know a lot of people have been to flea markets, foreign markets, whatever, farmers markets, and they get a better price. Is that negotiating? You know, in a broad sense, you might consider those negotiations, but they're more likely what we call bargaining or distributive negotiations because they're win-lose, not win-win. It's the old, you want 100, I want to pay 50, so we'll compromise at 75. This is just bargaining or haggling, but it is not at all what true negotiations is about. True negotiations is about seeing a much bigger picture, understanding the other party's interests and needs as well as your own, and looking to consummate a transaction that is a win for both parties. Another term for win-win negotiations is integrative negotiations. But can this work for all transactions? What about the purchase of a car? Isn't that just a bargain session, win-lose, where you're hoping to be the winner at the lower price? Well, believe it or not, when buying a car, you can maximize your opportunity to get the best price with a win-win negotiation. And here's why. The more you understand the needs of the dealer, the easier it will be for you to find the best car to buy that they will give you the lowest price on. For example, you may want a green Prius with a variety of options. Now, in a pure bargaining mode, the salesperson will respond to your request with the exact model you want and offer you whatever price. In a win-win, I would have learned about the salesperson, the dealership, how their inventory works, what their deadlines are, maybe even how the salespeople are evaluated. I might even learn about the salesperson's standing compared to the other salespeople, and if he or she is making their quota that month. Now, of course, if you ask all those questions like too direct, you might not get most of the information. But the idea is, again, we're in a collaborative mode. You're going to go to the dealer and you have a get-to-know-you conversation. You would be amazed at how much you could learn. I might share my information, such about my new 6-month-old daughter, how we just had a major roof repair that went way over budget, and we love to barbecue every Friday. See, now they're feeling closer and more empathetic to you. You have become a person in their minds, and they feel like you're a nice person who's also interested in them. Now, isn't this a better way to do the deal instead of the arguing over price and back and forth to the manager game? Then I would find out they have a shipment of 25 cars due to arrive any day, and that they have an overstock of blue Priuses that the manager's going crazy to get that inventory down. Now, maybe it wouldn't be the exact color you wanted, but if you could get the car for 15% less, would you complain? Now, let's find out the ultimate way to close this up, and the one tool that has been known to bring multi-billion-dollar companies to their knees. The BATNA. There are two very powerful ways to put yourself in a position of strength in any negotiation. And you know what? A friend of mine used them both, and he got a car for a lot less. The first way is to not let your emotions get in the way. You know, in some negotiations, such as personal, things deal with your personal issues, that may feel like it's hard to do. But it's really important to keep it all business if you want to maximize your negotiations return. Because in business, you cannot take behaviors personally, even if they appear to be specifically targeted at you. If you cannot keep your emotions out, get a friend or peer to do the negotiations for you. Keep the emotions out. The second way is to develop alternatives to your current option before you begin the negotiations. This is a huge step, which in the video, the woman didn't do. That's why she was emotional. She had no alternatives. She was a hostage in the worst way over her home. She was a hostage in the worst way over her home. So you want to find alternatives. Okay? So a friend of mine got another friend to do his negotiations for him to buy a car. And that person took him to both Toyota dealerships in town, and they played one against the other. Now, that person also told my friend he was not allowed to talk or show any emotion during any of the visits. They went to both dealerships multiple times, and yes, when they were not getting the price they wanted, they just left. That is the ultimate power you have, to choose another option, to buy from someone else. You know, we call these alternatives BATNAs, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Now, note, these are not alternative deals with the same party. That does not offer you any additional leverage in your negotiations. None. Not alternative deals with the same party, they're deals with another party. Because if you go into negotiations without alternatives, and I mean you try to have more than one alternative, you're just going to be beholden to the other party. And, you know, by the way, even if you don't tell them you have no options, your comments and behaviors during the negotiation will. You know, if you remember the mortgage video, the more prepared person was more confident, and the response from the bank was more favorable. Another thing that's also important, which you should have done, which the gentleman did, is know the other side's BATNAs. As part of your research, you should also try to find out the other party's alternatives or BATNAs. That's really important. Someone put a comment in the chat box. The car example is great. If we had the data, most people have a hard time finding that information. How do you suggest we go about finding out about the new batch of cars coming in and that they have many blue cars in the batch? That's what the get to know you conversation is at the dealership. So the dealer, the salesperson is going to tell you that. Why is the salesperson going to tell you that? Because you're going to be having a friendly get to know you conversation with them. Remember, if you go into the dealer fixated on I have to negotiate the best deal, you're going to drive yourself crazy. If you go into the dealership saying I'm going to meet somebody new who's an expert in cars, because remember, a lot of people go to the car dealer and they think they can out negotiate the dealer. Really? This is what this person does every day, 5, 6, 7 days a week. He is an expert at distributive negotiations, at bargaining negotiations. He is an expert. You will not beat him or her out. Forget it. I mean, the probability is slim because they do this all day long for the cars. They also know at the car dealer all the options and where they have room to do things. And they can choose to move that to your benefit or not. And if if you talk to them and have a friendly get to know them conversation, and you start talking about your barbecuing and you had a roof repair, and where do you live, by the way? Oh, I live in Queens. Oh, really? That's cool. Where in Queens? Oh, my cousin lives out that way. It's a friendly get to know you conversation. So then, oh yeah, I'm looking at a Prius. Honestly, I don't know how many people. I know we have people from overseas. We have people from all over the country. There's a great old show, which I used to love, which I haven't watched in ages, called Columbo, with an actor called Peter Falk. And what made the show so great is Peter Falk would play dumb, okay? Anybody see, just tell me in the chat box, anybody ever see Columbo? C-O-L? I want to know if anybody ever saw Columbo TV show. Anybody ever see Columbo? Put it in the chat box if you saw that show. It's a classic. I'm sure it's on some channel someplace with all the thousands of streamings. It was a great show because he'd get to the crime. Right, you loved it. He'd get to the crime. And in the first scene, he'd be talking to the person who committed the crime. And the person could be standing there holding a bloody knife. And he'd say, so what's happening here? The guy said, I couldn't believe it. I came in. This knife was stuck in this person's heart. And I came in, I pulled it out. Now, it's blatantly obvious that the person who found the knife would never pull it out unless they felt guilty, because why would you pull it out? What are you, crazy? You wouldn't touch the body. You'd be freaked out. And he would ask them innocent questions, and the show, he would go through asking lots of innocent questions along the way. Okay? And the people would be disarmed. The murderer, whoever the criminal is, would be disarmed and give him all the information he needs to prove the case. And over time, the individual is always a man usually, but sometimes a woman. Usually the men are the worst ones, right? And they would give all the information, give him enough information to solve the case. And finally, the last scene, he goes in and wraps it up. And I guess what I'm suggesting, what made Columbo great, is that is a technique that's extremely valuable in negotiation. To go in with not an attack mode, to go in a learning mode. Columbo was in a learning mode. He'd go in to learn because he knew that the one person that had all the answers was the criminal. And the more he could get the criminal to talk, the easier his job was going to be to solve this case. And that's what he did. He was friendly. He went in. Over the time, the person would get annoyed that he kept coming back, but he always played dumb. And they would tell him everything. And I'm suggesting that this is a great technique. I'm not suggesting it is. I use it all the time. A friendly get-to-know-you conversation. Go to the dealer. So when you say, how am I going to find out about that shipment? Well, because you're going to get chit-chatting with the person. And maybe you go for a test and you really love it. Now remember, this person wants to sell a car. And this is something I think people forget sometimes. This person wants to sell a car. That's how he or she makes their living. They don't want you to leave without buying a car. Obviously, they have limits on what they can do, but they want to sell a car. So you sitting there chit-chatting, giving that salesperson a sense that you're ready to buy, but there's something missing, that person will keep chit-chatting with you and telling you more and more because they want to sell a car. And the more you engage them, the more they share. Oh, I love Priuses. What color did you? I wanted a green, but they're so expensive. I don't know. Would you have a budget? Yeah, I don't know if I have a budget. I just, I think I was looking at like 22,000. I could do that. If you finance it, I don't like finance. I don't know. But do you have anything for 22? What do you have? That's okay, but it doesn't have air conditioning. I wish it had it. My wife will kill me. I can't go back without that. But what else does it have? Well, maybe that. I don't know. She won't like it. And you just have this friendly conversation. Before you know it, they'll tell you everything you want to know. So I say this whole long dissertation because it's really important to understand how you get these things to go. And I want everybody to understand. That's why I try to explain to everybody negotiations is a collaborative effort, not adversarial. And the more you see it as a collaborative, the easier it's going to be to get what you want. You won't always get everything you want, but that's why you got to go in with BATNAs and you have to go in prepared. Negotiations should be relatively easy. When I have a negotiation, I go in a friendly mode to meet somebody new and find out what's going on. And you can't get everything because sometimes what you want, they can't do. That's just life. But on the other times, when you share a full perspective, sometimes they'll say, I can't do this. But you said you're also looking to go on vacation on the 31st. Why? Yeah. We have this amazing thing. If you buy this car, I know it's a little more expensive. We're doing a promotion, 2 free airline tickets any place in the U.S. Really? Oh, wow, that saves me $1,000. Oh, really? That could make a difference. So by sharing information, they may be able to do something. You never know. So that's why it's a get-to-know-you deal. So let's move on. So now the interesting question is, how can you out-negotiate a billion-dollar company? Can you only have one buyer